Okay, throughout this presentation, we acknowledge the Tiwi Islands as Ratuari Irara, meaning two islands. Like most Indigenous languages, the consonants are soft and the vowels are sonorant or louder. So bend the tongue backwards, retroflex, Ratuari Irara. Also, it's necessary to problematize the long-standing practice of avoiding original place names, especially given English's wide phonological potential, which hints at mindset barriers and which helps us begin our presentation.
The general background: Tiwi Islands are parts of the Australian North Territory. The Tiwi Islands consist of two main islands, along with several smaller ones. The livelihoods of Tiwi people are highly dependent on natural resources, especially economic benefits from land-using activities such as mining, carbon fishery, and forestry. How sea level rising influenced the island? Firstly, the land includes 90 threatened plant species and 30 threatened fauna species, and a healthy population of small mammals that have undergone recent dramatic decline on the mainland. The virus cycle in the environment: the coastal freshwater places to become salter in the future. However, the human dwelling that people might movement and migrate occur.
Sea level rise due to climate change. According to reports, the average sea level rise could be as much as 2 meters by the end of the century. We focus on the Tiwi Island. Sea level in the North Australia has been rising by the 10 meters a year for the past 20 years, reaching 2 to 3 times the global average. The threatened sea turtle habitat and the home of the Tiwi Island.
For over 20,000 years, since before the last ice age, Tiwi meaning we the only people, and as such they consider themselves distinct from mainland Aboriginals. This means that traditional philosophical approaches to Indigenous engagement such as relationality are limited and thus requires a more empathetic approach to understand pain. Hence, a pedagogical understanding of Tiwi culture through imagery and iconography is required to accommodate and evaluate rising sea levels. Since over the past 20 years, sea level rise around the Tiwi Islands has been rising about 10 millimeters each year.
As you can see, impacts of sea level rise and Western invasion both overlap, exacerbating their consequences.
We have three intended audience based on our two-pronged solution. First, we have the Tiwi Land Council elders. It's important for Indigenous elders to be engaged as part of the process in order to understand and express their pain and allow for adaptation to rising sea levels. Engagement with bureaucrats from the Department of Environmental, Water, Heritage and the Arts, who have the power to declare areas as Indigenous protected areas, are our second intended audience, something which the Tiwi people are advocating for. Finally, the International Panel on Climate Change Social Economic Working Group, who oversee Indigenous responses to climate change, is our third intended audience.
The Tiwi Islands, like the rest of Australia, have extensive colonial history dating back to 1644 with the Dutch ships sailing through the Dundas Strait, and later in 1705, a Dutch landing on the coast of Pirapanalai. And finally in 1818, where a British navigator rediscovered the land, resulting in a British settlement by 1824. Ever since, colonialism has posed a risk to the Tiwi people, suppressing Indigenous forms of government and dismantling social structures and community. Although the land legally belongs to the Tiwi people, the government enforces a top-down Western planning framework for climate change adaptation. This imposes white structures, gives no recognition to Indigenous knowledge, and dismantles their right to self-determination through a one-size-fits-all framework, placing them as out of context. It is necessary to recognize the continuation of colonialism and its impacts to clarify an effective adaptation plan to the climate crisis.
There are several approaches and methods to successful interdisciplinary field work, and our approach is directed by current interdisciplinary literature, and our method is informed by current Indigenous practice. Our method is supported by recent similar fieldwork in Central Australia, in which a team of researchers set out to understand better the local effects of climate change there. Our definition of successful interdisciplinary work is one that results in a worked, equitable knowledge that facilitates diverse perspective, with the notion that in those perspectives lie vital detail that may be necessary to address and communicate community needs. Our method, the Yarning Circle, differs from the Central Australian study in that it does not only seek to interview, create focus groups or survey populations of stakeholders, but mainly to assume a community-minded, multi-sided listener role where we bear witness to and take part in socially constructed solutions. So a Yarning Circle may be broken down into these 5 elements. An important aspect to note is, unlike education, for example, where learning may be either teacher or learner-centered, the Yarning Circle has no center. And this is a fact which helps reverse social biases inherent to hierarchical Western systems and approaches. And in our own preparation for this project, in our own Yarning Circles, we came to consensuses on several foundational questions to our own work. Engaged in reflective note-taking, writing our thoughts, particularly disagreements, into journals, and we agreed to avoid discipline-specific jargon in order to find good common ground. We found Strober's guidance about habits of thought, which he refers to as fishbowl effect, instructive. Being mindful of what ideas might be ours compared to ideas that have been shaped by our disciplines.
For the integrated perspective, based on our diagram and during our interdisciplinary process, education and history seems more suited for the task than others because history is primary carry for the instruction of national and civilization identity based on the historical time. Historical perspective is relevant to have in order to appreciate the impact of a colonialism system on indigenous one. Indeed, education is important because education tries to construct knowledge in the best way that we can respectful of the learning environment. The Tiwi College Climate Change Project is an academic program for Tiwi land facing the sea level rise issue and study more knowledge for the Tiwi land. However, digital media was useful in suggestion viral ways to communicate knowledge, and international was useful in set a global communication framework, like what we consider in the diagram of indigenous politics and social constructivism. The philosophy was useful in discuss a holistic, ethical, and deeper representativeness to the issue.
There were challenges integrating discipline within our team, particularly due to differences between theory and practice. Philosophy focused on the theoretical framework, while digital culture rely on particular application like digital product and technology. This difference led to disagreement, but keep journal help us to reflect and approach problem solving more effectively. VR Young Cycle are already in practice, and perhaps this could be a way to the future enhance our method. From digital media perspective, for example, you can look this picture. It's from the Sydney Uni Museum on Aboriginal digital media display and culture. We can create a digital museum to promotion the culture, stay, and the impact of the Tiwi Islands in the future.
Our proposed solution follows a two-pronged plan which is divided into subsections. The first prong works towards the establishment of Tiwi Islands as an Indigenous protected area, which is a program that operates under the Australian government in support of First Nations to manage their land by traditional owners' objectives and the Australian National Reserve System. In an attempt to create a solution that does not follow the direction of typical Western policymaking, it is significant to consider the procedural vulnerabilities that may exist. In regards to this case study, procedural vulnerabilities would be that First Nations people are not consulted or included in the decision-making, or that the legality around protecting their land rights is inaccessible, slow, or biased, which may lead to further land dispossession and environmental devastation. To battle this, we must adopt a culturally safe approach, which can be achieved through the inclusion of Indigenous knowledge. Past and current approaches to climate adaptation in the Tiwi Islands have failed to engage effectively with Tiwi governance. Therefore, it is pinnacle that we engage with the Tiwi culture in their decision-making. For example, we must centralize the safety of country as a way of acknowledging the spiritual connection that the Tiwi people have with the Tiwi Islands, recognizing how First Nations people have cared for and historically managed their land. It is only then that we can work towards establishing an IPA status that will support the Tiwi people in their land management, benefiting from an environment of empowerment, cultural connection, and well-being. The Tiwi Land Council is in agreement with the Tiwi IPA, as, quote, it will help us to continue to look after our country and our culture through an engagement in community-based participatory planning, traditional owner consultations, and the reinforcing of sovereign rights over the land. It would be beneficial to extend the IPA to the surrounding marine areas that go beyond the intertidal zones as they withhold traditional status to the Tiwi people through its connection to Dreamtime creation stories. According to the Tiwi Land Council, a Tiwi Islands IPA will deliver more than just environmental benefits. It will also help Tiwi protect the cultural values of their islands for future generations and result in significant health, education, economic, and social benefits.
Prong takes Indigenous protected area status enshrined in the Tiwi Islands into the data and statistical network of the United Nations. Our proposal is to leverage this to gain International Panel on Climate Change Observer status under the Warsaw International Mechanism, which provides a framework for the formation of task groups that strengthen dialogue and communication. Our proposal is to create a yarning circle between Indigenous communities, overcoming language barriers by sharing digital experiences, responses, and adaptations to rising sea levels. For example, the current Tiwi response to feral cats through desexing and quarantining can be supplemented with the Maori experience of strategic mass trapping based on random placement and cultural understanding of tracking of feral cats, which has led to the eradication of feral cats on Little Barrier Island in New Zealand. The benefit of all this being is that it can be applied on a global transnational scale and provides a solution to rising sea levels while also promoting the Tiwi people's desire for self-determination and overcoming issues of colonialism that has underwritten the Tiwi people's past existence. Thank you.